to Pop This, the podcast where three women talk about pop culture. Here are your hosts, Lisa Christiansen, Andrea Gin, and Andrea Warner.
Well, this is kind of a segue into our conversation today, but we are going to talk about a movie. I think the last time I did see this movie is when it came out, which is 1999, and I remember thinking, oh, I've seen that movie, and I keep thinking about how many times I've said that to people. Oh, I've seen that, only to rewatch it and go, I remembered nothing about this movie.
I know. Me too.
It was just, I had a couple of key scenes, which I don't even know now if I remembered or just saw them in social media. There were pictures of the three. This is the talented Mr. Ripley, but I was shocked at how bad my memory really was. I was assuming I got this. If you needed me to describe this film to you, I could have done it. There were characters I didn't even remember showed up. I didn't know. Now I'm thinking maybe I didn't see this movie. I don't know.
Like the whole beginning of the movie, like the first scenes where he meets Dickie's parents and he's like pretending to be somebody else. Like I had no memory of that opening at all.
No,
it was all new to me.
Yeah, it was complete. Like I didn't. The weird apartment he was living in, like in a pit somewhere.
Yeah.
I had no, like, where is that real? Like I've seen basement apartments and sub-basement apartments, but I didn't know you could actually live in a pit. But anyway, I'd forgotten almost everything.
The thing I remember the most about it was not actually about the movie. It was about the discourse around the fact that Matt Damon had to be on a very restrictive diet where he was only eating boiled chicken, and everyone else was like young and having fun in Italy and like eating a ton of pasta and like having a great time. But the interpretation of the character was that he had to be really like lanky and boyish, so he didn't get to like enjoy Italian food. And for some reason, every magazine I read wrote about that. About Matt Damon's like very restrictive boiled poached chicken diet, which then entered the discourse again when he did the Bourne movies. So apparently this man loves just like a weird diet to be what he talks about when he makes a movie.
Yeah,
I
wow.
don't love
Yeah,
he goes really method. It's really method.
Yeah, he wants you to know how much effort he's putting in, I think. But or just, I don't know, maybe he just didn't, he wasn't that was the most interesting story they got out of him for some reason. But yeah, like the weird amount I read about his like boiled chicken was
I'm gonna have
really
to say
stayed with me.
Matt Damon, I'm going to up you a bit with Christian Bale in that Machinist movie. Did anyone see that?
No.
He literally looks like he's about to die any day. Like, I don't know how or who told him, like, I think his diet was just smelling boiled chicken. Like, that's what he looked like.
That's sad. It's sad. I want to take like that Matt Damon to actually not to Italy because I can't afford that. I work in the arts, but I'll take him to like an Olive Garden and we'll do like a tour of Italy, and he can just enjoy a lot of pastas on me. So Matt Damon, if you're listening, that offer's on the table. I'm really happy to take you to an Olive Garden. I think there's one in Surrey, ? Like, I don't know where the closest Olive Garden
Double up
is,
on those
but
breadsticks too. Just go for it, right? I mean,
you know what? We'll get a boat of like fettuccine Alfredo sauce. That's how like ballin' I'm willing to be on this outing. Just to like make up for his sad boiled chicken diet that he was on in like 1998 or whatever it was when he was filming this.
Wow. Well, I didn't remember that. And I'm apparently, now I'm feeling like I never did see this movie. So I'm very glad.
What I realized watching it is that a few years ago, I bought this purse that I really loved because it was kind of retro looking and like had this kind of 50s or 60s like ladylike feel to it, but it was modern. And anyway, the brand was called Marge Sherwood. And I was only while watching the movie at this time that I was like, oh, that's what that is a reference to, because it's a Korean brand. And I could never figure out why they called it Marge Sherwood until like last night, essentially.
So was this a big popular movie in Korea?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Wouldn't that be funny to find that out?
We'd have to isolate the worldwide box office, I guess, and like see
Yeah.
if a big chunk of it is in Korea.
But it makes so much sense because Gwyneth Paltrow's March has so much style and like kind of actually deserves like a handbag line named after her.
Well, she deserves something because nothing else was going on for her in a positive way in that movie. So
I feel like that movie is like peak acting era Gwyneth Paltrow, actually.
Yes.
Like it might be one of her best performances. And it has that distinction of having, I think, the sexiest cast of 1999. Like Kate Blanchett,
yes.
Jude Law, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like truly everybody is in it. And I also had forgotten that. And when I rewatched it, like for I think I've seen it a couple of times in the late 90s, early 2000s. And yeah, when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, damn, like everyone really is so sexy in this movie.
Yeah, they're all at like their peak in their careers too. So it's just like this beautiful postcard I found like watching it. It was just like, oh, everybody looks so young and happy and like
they're so baby faced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a glow on them, and they're in Italy, and unlike the TV show, this is in color. So yeah, it felt like a lot.
It felt like an Italian vacation.
I was going to say, it's got that 90s warmth trend where everything is really warm. And that definitely, I think, adds to the heat of it all. Like it really has that sort of yellow lighting. All the linens are also yellow, which made me feel bonkers. I was like, no Italian restaurant has a yellow linen. Those are white. They're bleaching them.
Well, yeah, take the filter off, whatever I guess that was or something. But
it just made me laugh. Anyway.
And there was a lot of saxophone, and I know that was meant to be jazz, but it still made me feel kind of 80s, 90s with all that sax.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an adaptation choice, right? And in the book and in the miniseries, Dickie's a painter and not a very good one. But for the movie, they decide he's into jazz. Like that's the big sort of change they make in the 90s movie. And I think it's because it's more dynamic and because you get to have Matt Damon sing My Funny Valentine while Dickie plays the saxophone, and then Jude Law looks at him in a way that I think says, yes, I'm bisexual. So that's a very important decision. And I don't think anyone ever looks at another person painting and goes, yes, I'm bisexual. It has to be somebody singing My Funny Valentine while you play the saxophone. That's really important, actually. Or, well, someone else plays the saxophone. That's like the key to bisexuality.
Yes. Yeah, it's like Lost Boys with Mr. Guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're getting right into the movie now because now I want to say
we're getting into it. We can't help it.
Yeah, I know we can't help it. Yeah. So I'm just going to say, I'm Lisa Christiansen.
I'm Andrea Gin.
I'm Cynara Geissler.
And you're listening to Pop This. Welcome back, Cynara Geissler. We've lost count of how many times you've been on co-hosting this podcast, but it's been many. We love having you on.
We sure do.
You're so smart and you know everything about pop culture. And also this movie that we're talking about is a lot about fashion, I think. And you are a fashionista, so it seems appropriate to have you on as well for that reason.
Yeah. Can I just say, I mean, we can see each other, but,
I know.
You know, obviously people listening to the podcast can't see your wonderful, like you look amazing.
Cynara looks awesome. Lisa and I are in our podcast outfits. Which is
I like the idea of a podcast outfit. Is it just like baffling? Just like
this is what I wear every time.
Yeah. Lisa, that probably does help dampen down your sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to wear your like baffling poncho for recording because you're professionals. That's professional attire in the podcast
That's right.
world.
Yes. It's my professional podcast outfit.
Which is to say sweats.
Extremely professional.
Yeah. Which is to say one pink hoodie that I wear every week. So
it puts you in the zone for podcasting.
I know what I'm doing. Like I lift it up and I hold it and I say we're back, each week. So yeah.
Okay, so today we are talking about the new television series called Ripley, which is a new adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's novel, The Talented Mr. Ripley. And we're talking about that TV series, and we're talking about the 1999 movie, The Talented Mr. Ripley, which we have done a little bit in the intro. But because I guess, going into watching Ripley, the natural inclination is to be like, let's compare these two things and, see which one is better, which one succeeded at this. And so I'm actually really curious to hear from Cynara today, because you're the only one of the three of us who has read the novel. And so I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on the two different adaptations as well.
Well, 3, we were going to do Purple Noon is out there too, the French one.
Have you seen it?
I have.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, it's amazing. But then again, I have seen it, but I bet if I watch it now, I'll be like, is this the same movie that I've seen? I have no idea.
Yeah, what percentage of movies do you think that applies to that you've seen, Lisa?
I'm starting to wonder. I honestly...
You can just go back and start all over again. Just like
I feel like I should.
No
I feel like, there's some movies I have repeatedly seen, but if I'm just to go back and see a movie I saw once and I say to people quite confidently, oh, I've seen that, I have not. Do
you have annual watches or reads? I think that's the difference for me. Things that I'm every year or 2 years, I'm going to rewatch or read because I enjoy it so much. Those I will retain really well. But things where it's I watched it when it came out, I used to retain those well. But then 2020 happened, which was like a Men in Black style mind wipe for me. So I think there's some parts of my brain truly that are just walled off. But if it's something I consume every year, for example, Batman Returns, an excellent holiday film that I watch every holiday season as part of my holiday viewing. Yes. So, I recall it very well, and I recall the jokes really well, and I enjoy watching it every time.
I don't know anything about Batman.
Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer. So Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in it, and Danny DeVito is the Penguin. Michael Keaton is Batman. It's iconic performances all around from DeVito, Pfeiffer, Keaton, and it's set at Christmas time. Yeah.
It's so curious, what made you pick that out of all the Batmans to be the one that you return to?
I think I really like Michelle Pfeiffer's performance in it. So there's a really extended scene where she gets pushed out of a window and then has to go to her home, is listening to her answering machine, and slowly kind of destroys her pink apartment while making the black cat suit out of a raincoat. And it's a scene she does by herself, and it has a lot of physicality, a lot of physical comedy. It just really, I think, is a movie, a great script. It gives the actors who are in it space to really make a meal out of their parts. And I think that's why it stays with me. It takes itself seriously enough, which is always interesting in a movie where it could go really camp. Not to say that Tim Burton's never camp or over the top, but there's just something very actorly, actually, about it that makes me want to watch those performances over and over. Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen it, but now that you say it's a Christmas movie, I'm interested. I've never heard people talk about it as a Christmas movie.
Oh, yeah. There's the Gotham City Ice Princess who... there's a tree lighting ceremony that ends in a very grisly manner. It's set at Christmas time, but it's Tim Burton's Gotham City. So it's very dark. It's dark Christmas the way that Gremlins is dark Christmas or Die Hard is dark Christmas. So if you like to have some Christmas movies that aren't just, It's a Wonderful Life or White Christmas,
Love Actually or The
Batman
Holiday?
Returns. Yeah, Love Actually or The Holiday. I don't know if you've heard of either of those films, but a lot of people like them and watch them annually.
Yeah.
Personally, I've never seen or heard of either. This is the first time I'm hearing of them, so
first time.
I better add those to my list. Yeah.
I watch the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring trilogy every year at Christmas. I don't it's not just me. It's become a weird. Well, I like director's cut too.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're in it. Do you have little hobbit feet you put on while you watch it?
I try to eat
I don't
like
know
they
why
do with
that's
11Zs, and the whole thing. And if I ever feel kind of sickly, just a little bit sad, I will watch the first of the trilogy because I go, look, if Frodo can get the ring to Mordor, you can deal with this flu. That's my thinking.
Oh, it's a comfort film for you. Mm-hmm. That's
It's
nice.
very
I
much
mean,
a
that
comfort
feels like
film.
you're maybe holding yourself to a very high standard of life. If you're like, look, if Frodo can go to Mordor, I can. I'm like, maybe don't diminish your problems that much. Like they're still real, but if you're comparing yourself to that quest, yeah.
What do you think of the idea of like stopping movies before they get dark and it gets to the bad part of the movie? Because I've considered, doing that with Titanic, like just watching the happy part where they kind of get on the boat and they're having fun and stuff like that, but then just like ending it as soon as the boat starts sinking. Like I don't want to.
That's literally halfway through, though. I think
Yeah,
I timed
exactly.
that. Yeah.
But also just like watching the Lord of the Rings, like sort of the nice, happy, fun part of the first part of the movies, and then just like tailing off.
Well, okay. Yes, that's a good idea. However, my favorite part of all of the movies is Aragorn. And we don't really get a chance to feel Aragorn until he's like in danger and he has to protect everyone. And then, there's a famous scene where he's so upset because he thinks the hobbits are dead and he kicks the ground because he's so angry. And everyone who's like nerdy about the films knows that in real life, Viggo Mortensen broke his toe in that scene. You talk about Michelle Pfeiffer's commitment. Did she break a toe?
That's a big commitment. That's a big commitment. Yeah. No, but she did. The scene where she has to hit things with a whip, she actually did. She got so good at using a whip that she could do it in one take. So, you should watch it and just be really impressed with her whip work and get really excited about her discontinued beautiful red lipstick that you can't buy anymore.
I'm happy to do that. I will do that.
Yeah, you'll love it.
We should read Cynara's
Get
bio.
back on topic.
Back on topic. Cynara Geissler is a chronically ill writer, performer, editor, and book publishing professional who invented toddler grandma style and loves to talk about pop culture, fat liberation, feminism, and feelings. She's appeared on our podcast numerous times, including our Poltergeist, Cruel Intentions, White Lotus, Lula Rich, Encanto, the Taylor Swift Eras concert film, and of course, our Christmas childhood specials episodes. So
iconic episode where we convinced Lisa to hate her most favorite special.
I know.
I know.
The episode where we broke Lisa. Yeah, I remember that episode.
I know.
It's not too hard to do, but thank you. Thank you for sounding like you felt a little bit bad.
I did feel bad that you completely ruined a beautiful childhood memory for yourself.
So Lisa, do you want to just read the background for the talented Mr. Ripley so we all have a basis of understanding of like where this series is coming from?
Okay, we have some backgrounds?
Yeah, do the book.
The book. Okay,
Yeah.
This is the book. All right. The Talented Mr. Ripley is a 1955 psychological thriller novel by Patricia Highsmith. The novel introduced the character of Tom Ripley, who returns in 4 subsequent novels. It has been adapted numerous times for screen, including Purple Noon, starring Alain Delon, The Talented Mr. Ripley in 1999, starring Matt Damon, and Ripley, starring Andrew Scott, also known as the Sexy Priest.
Okay,
Just
so
adding
Lisa,
that.
Indeed.
I'm just going to ask you this right now, but because you're the only one that has seen all 3, but who is your favorite Ripley out of those 3?
I've been reading a lot of reviews, but I really like Andrew Scott's. I really, really do. Maybe I'm just getting a soft spot for him for watching so many things, but Delon in Purple Noon, it's a French film from 1966, I think, and he is like, the smoldering, sexy French guy, and you're like, okay. But I think Andrew Scott has a really strange way of playing the subtle psychopath, which I like better than the really
aged
emotive
up,
one.
way aged up too.
Yeah, way aged up.
Yeah, this is an older Ripley than we're used to seeing.
So the only uncomfortable thing I have to say about this particular one is I can't get an age reading on this Dickie Greenleaf at all. But Dakota Fanning is quite young, no?
Andrew Scott is 47. I'm pretty sure the guy playing Dickie is 40 or 41. So I think we're supposed to read this Ripley as about 40, Dickie is about 35. And then, the question about Dakota Fanning, I think she's in her 30s, but she looks very youthful.
She really, okay.
But also, that was, I mean, I really enjoyed the series. I thought it was stunning in many ways. But the age thing, like it was a bit of a question mark for me because it feels like the story hinges around this idea of like these kind of young people living it up in Italy and just being reckless and, like having no responsibilities really, and just like going to parties, summering here, wintering there. And it felt weird to consider like someone who's in their 40s doing that and ingratiating himself into a group of friends like that, because that would seem weird.
However, they do spend a lot of time on showing how bleak his life is, how absolutely bleak it is. And really, those shots of just those sad, sad New Yorkers sitting on buses and all kinds of things. And then that contrast. I would have gone if I were, I don't know if the people who made Ripley are listening, but I might have gone a bit Wizard of Oz on it and done that in black and white. And then when he got to Italy, color. But that's me.
So your question is whether like Steven Zalian, screenwriter of The Irishman, listens to this podcast. I would say 100% yes. So definitely give him criticism about the new series.
It's not too late for some note. You know what I mean?
I think it's an interesting choice because we have to assume that this Ripley is like a real loser, right? Because it's one thing to be 25 and like doing low level sort of like bank cons where you're impersonating a collections agency and getting people to sort of send you checks. It's another thing to be doing that at 40, right? And like still living at around 40 and like still living in a shared sort of like toilet apartment building. Like, I think we are meant to sort of understand this Ripley as like very desperate and down on his luck in a way that maybe you don't in other adaptations. And he's very paranoid, this Ripley. So many shots of him being alone. He's somehow always at the bottom of a staircase. I think that's really important. Like the idea that this man just can't get ahead. He's trying so hard to climb into this better life, but he's always sort of pursued. Like I kind of think that was the preoccupation here a little bit. The visualization of the sort of like desiring a better life, a higher status was really, I noticed it constantly. The sort of like just how many long stairs and tunnels he had to walk up to get to that house in Hatrani. And then he gets to the very top and it's like, oh, they're down at the beach. I was like, this is incredible. This man has walked for 45 minutes to get to this like, house. He has to sleep outside at the bus station. Like, I think it's such an interesting choice for this one to, the cinematographer is, the name is not coming to me, but like Steve Zalian worked with this amazing cinematographer. And I do think in the neo-noir series, Ripley, the Italy is like not as lush as it is in the movie for sure. Like because it's in black and white, there's this sense of like dankness that sort of hovers around the edges of it in a way that doesn't really happen in the really warm and bright 1999 movie. So I think that to me it has that, it's doing the work of bringing that interiority of Ripley sort of into the external, because in the books, I think part of why people love them so much is their first person. So you are in the mind of Tom Ripley, and so you are following his thoughts. And so the thing that I think is so interesting is before we even get to the very important boat murder scene that we should talk about, in the book, he's thinking about it on the train there. He's like, I got to kill Dickie. How am I maybe going to do it? And then in the book, we also know that he's afraid of the water. That's a like key thing to him because his parents drowned in Boston Harbor We don't know why, but they drowned when he was little. So there's like this interiority to him that I think is interesting, but he's also inconsistent. He changes his mind about things. So I think that that's a compelling... I think with Andrew Scott's Ripley, you definitely have a Ripley where you're not always sure what his motivations are, which is really interesting. Because with Matt Damon's Ripley, it's very clear he's in love with Dickie, right? It's very much presented like a crime of passion. He spoons, Jude Law's dead body in the boat. It's like so romantic. There's that like overhead shot, right? And like this Ripley, he might be a little bit attracted to Dickie, but that's not really what's driving him, I think, right? Like, or at least I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like there was, I thought the sexual attraction was not absent, but it was not really presented as a motivation either. It was just incidental and there a little bit. Although, one thing I do want to say is that I think having an accountability process conversation in a gazebo is the gayest thing I've ever seen on TV. Like, truly, like, you come home, your house guest is dressed in your clothing, doing an impression of you in your room. You don't know them very well, and you're like, take my clothes off. I'm going to need a moment. Let's go sit in the gazebo and talk about the state of our friendship. I'm like, that's the queerest thing I've ever heard. That's the gayest, queerest possible reaction to catching somebody in drag as you in your home. Like, it kills me. It's so funny. I don't think it's necessarily meant to be funny, but I did laugh out loud at that scene. I was like, this is incredible.
My first
truly.
thought was... Yeah, my first thought was one was going to go, I am 16 going on 17.
Yeah, gazebos have an iconic presence in pop culture. Yeah.
Yes.
I have to say, it took me a while to get used to the black and white, like high definition black and white, because I've seen a lot of noirs and they're always like older movies and there's a certain look to them. And I'm used to it, and I get that it creates an atmosphere and a feeling, but I find that like high definition modern black and white movies are like it's their own thing, and it's just like visually hard for me to wrap my mind around like the getting the same atmosphere of a noir when it's like so sharp and
it's so crisp, right? Yeah, crisp. I thought about that a lot while watching it, but I also thought that they really were like, we're leaning hard into Caravaggio. Like, we really want to use this motif of Caravaggio and make this a centerpiece of this series. Caravaggio, also famously gay and a murderer. So I felt like they were really leaning into that idea of light and the interplay of light and shadow in Caravaggio. So like the cinematography to me was like, we are going to do everything we can to make every shot look like a painting, specifically at Caravaggio. So I thought, like, it's so ambitious. And certainly I felt it was like a real feast for my eyes while watching it. But did I think it was like the best way to tell this story? I don't know, but I think it's a valid way to tell this story. Yeah.
It's almost as if they were like saying we have to be completely opposite, because you keep mentioning too that warm glow. Like, if there's anything you take away from Talented Mr. Ripley, even in the poster, he's all bathed in golden light. So that's a big, and this Anthony Minghella is the same one who did The English Patient too, right? And that's another.
Yes, and so the 90s trends of filmmaking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's mannered, right? So this is trying to look a lot more to me 50s, 60s than the movie. Like, they really, there's like maybe one scene where they kind of give people like Brill creamed hair. Like, they want these 90s hunks and babes to not look too dated. That's like clearly important to this movie. Like, people would not be walking around with like uncreamed hair in that era, even in Italy. And like, the amount that Jude Law is just like not in a shirt or an open shirt, I was like, look, even in the late 50s, early 60s, men were not shirtless that much. Like, they make some choices that I actually think date the movie to the 90s maybe more than they intended. Like, it's kind of funny, right? To see how a movie that is mimicking another time ages based on the sort of trends of the filmmaking of that time. So yeah, they definitely understood, I think, that part of the appeal of that movie would be like, look at these hot actors. So they did not want to like detract from their beauty by making them look too 1950s, is my feeling in the styling, at least.
Is this possibly Gwyneth Paltrow's best movie?
Yeah, I think so. Because Gwyneth Paltrow's Marge is very warm, immediately takes a liking to Tom. There's that joke about how he's got that, his undercoat is gray because he's so pale. And she's like, I'm pale too. And they get along and they like each other. But in the books, Marge is is hostile to Tom, is not a really big fan.
Like in the series.
Yeah. And the series plays it similarly. Like Marge is not super welcoming. She's not necessarily mean, but in the movie, I think like Gwyneth Paltrow's approach to the character is like quite warm and accepting. And that's important because later on, when she becomes like suspicious of him, she plays it as very heartbroken, right? Like it's kind of a big performance. Whereas I think in the series, what Dakota Fanning's doing is much more subtle, right? Like if she suspects him, it's not entirely clear. And we sort of get that one moment where she's confronting him about the rings. And it's that ring confrontation that also exists in the book too. It's interesting what key scenes they keep the same throughout all the adaptations. But like in this scene, it kind of turns in a way that you don't expect. But in the film, that's like when she really suspects Tom, is when she's like, you've got Tom's rings and he would have never taken those. Or you've got Dickie's rings, sorry. And he would have never given those to you and he would have never taken those off, right? Yeah.
The other scene that I thought was so peculiar in both the movie and the TV show, and I don't know if it was in the book, strangely, is the purchasing of a too small bathing suit wearing dress shoes in the sand to confront and pretend, oh, Dickie, it's you. Like, was that in the book too?
He has to get a bathing suit. In the book, it's more because he's afraid of the water. So like the reluctance around the bathing suit is partly a reluctance about showing his body, but it's also a reluctance of like he's afraid of the water and he doesn't know how to swim. Interestingly, in this series, the boat murder is much closer to what happens in the book, which is that like Tom is not very adept in the water. And so when he does this and he's trying to weigh the body down, like he falls out of the boat and then has to like chase the boat. Like that's in the book as well. So very, very different choice in the movie, I think, to make that scene much more romantic, right? Much more like this tragic crime of passion. Like Matt Damon's Tom is desperate to be with Dickie. And when Dickie is like, I don't want you to come skiing, he's so despondent that he'll be like cut off from this person he's infatuated with, and also the money that he wants, and also the life that he wants, that like he attacks him, but then he's deeply affected by that murder in a way that I think this Ripley in the new series, like, do we think he feels remorse about that murder? I don't know. It's not 100% clear, right? I think he feels inconvenienced by it in the aftermath.
But
yeah.
But just back to Marge for a second. I was wanting to talk about like how Gwyneth's Marge is iconic, as you know. Like as you just heard, she has like a purse line named after her character.
She has her own purse line.
But Dakota Fanning, I grew to really appreciate how her Marge was more of like a modern woman for those times. Like she was wearing trousers and Oxford shoes.
She made me think of Patricia Highsmith, what she would have been dressed in. That's what I was thinking. But
yeah,
I don't
and she
know.
goes to like parties with artists and smokes cigarettes and has her own mind. Like she's her own person. And kind of doesn't seem to have much patience for Dickie's sort of like jerking her around for the movie the way that, you know, Gwyneth's Marge does. And so, yeah, at first I was like, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know about this portrayal of Marge. But now by the end of the series, I came to appreciate that she kind of created this really strong woman that just seemed to be like more believable in her actions of what she did. I don't know. How did you feel about the two Marges?
Yeah, Lisa, did you vibe harder with one Marge or the other?
Well, yeah, I definitely liked Dakota's I think, again, like, I just felt more like sad for this Marge. I felt embarrassed for her. And I don't feel that with Dakota Fanning. I feel like she's she's got something interesting about her. Even though Marge is writing like the Gwyneth Paltrow, I just felt there was something so sad and desperate about her. So
we don't see her write as much too, right? That 1999 movie is much more interested in us having like a twisted love triangle. And it's really making that the focus of its adaptation, right? That like Tom is coming between Marge and Dickie. Dickie might really actually be in love with Marge in that 1999 version. In Patricia Highsmith's book, it's very clear he's not. He just sort of says, well, we got together in this long European rainy winter. It literally rained for 4 months. There were no other Americans around. It's Montebello in the book. It's a Trani in the adaptation. And I can't remember if it's a Trani in the movie, but a small Italian beach town is the point. And so it's sort of like Dickie feels like he owes some niceties to Marge in the book, but he's like, doesn't want to marry her, and he's never slept with her. The book makes that really, really clear, that she is like she's more in love with him than he is with her. I think the movie does that a little bit, but the key thing the movie does, the big difference, is that pregnancy storyline. And that's actually part of what makes me, it's part of what makes me love the movie as an adaptation. Like, I actually think when we're looking at screenplays and adapting of books, which, this is like a 10-hour read of a book, right? So like to put it into 2 hours is a challenge, but I thought they made some really like expeditious, smart choices. So like they add that Cate Blanchett character. She's not around or important in the book at all. And they add that detail. And early in the movie, there's that moment where that character who is pregnant with Dickie's baby like calls out to him in the street, and he says like hello to her. And then later she's drowned during some sort of Italian religious ceremony that takes place on the water. I'm not clear what that event is, but it was just important.
Where the Virgin Mary comes out of the ocean? Yeah.
Where the Virgin Mary is floating in the ocean. If anyone wants to tell me if this is a real Italian practice, I would love to know. But anyway, for the movie, it's this big like aquatic Virgin Mary festival. But it happens that way because we need to publicly see the body of this woman who has drowned because we assume she has an unwanted pregnancy, and it's the late 1950s. So like that really primes us to dislike Dickie, because Gwyneth Paltrow's Marge really loves him and he's cheating on her. He's screwing around. Also, maybe this makes people like him, but for me, the fact that he's like, I'm a jazz man in Italy, I'm like, that's very annoying. You're an annoying
Oh my
person.
gosh, it was the worst.
Like he's wearing like the little pork pie hat, and I'm just like, honestly, the searing hotness of Jude Law at that time that he could pull that hat off, incredible. Because I don't think anyone else is wearing that hat and me thinking like, you are looking good. But I do really like that choice, because I think they're going, we need something dynamic, because showing Jude Law painting is not going to be exciting. So they make that like jazz choice. I think it gives it like a little bit of Chicago.
He was a good sax player though.
He was, but they do say he only knows 4 songs, right? Like they throw in that little thing about
but he was good
he
at
really
it.
Only knows how to. He could play 4 songs, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but the painting is painful. I mean, it's so terrible.
Yeah.
And that I thought was super like no. And so I was wondering with that with the choice of making Dickie a sax player, which all I can think of is Rob Lowe and St. Elmo's Fire, but he wasn't terrible, whereas Dickie as a painter is just terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference between a playboy and a dilettante, right? It's like, what do you dislike more? Somebody who has a bit of talent and is using it to like womanize and do whatever he wants. And they really make, to me, that Dickie is like a very Gatsby Dickie, right? Like a very like Daisy and Tom, like those rich people, they just toy with others, they smash them up, they leave them broken, they move on to their next thing, right? I feel like it's very that kind of interpretation. It's got a little bit of like Fosse Chicago in there too, like jazz and liquor. Like I guess they thought, oh, when people think of in the 90s, when people think of olden times, they think about jazz. Like, I don't know. It is a funny decision, but it also allows for that moment where Dickie is like a little bit suspicious of Tom and says, oh yeah, you better move along. Like, I'm not going to go back to the States. I love my life here in Italy. And then Tom literally drops all those jazz records in front of him. I'm like, the most hilarious literal dropping of a hint ever in film. Like, he drops a bunch of jazz records and Jude Law's Dickie's like, wait a minute, you like jazz? Like, how about you hang out a little bit longer? Because I have a fellow jazz man, here with me in Italy. Capital of jazz. I also have a lot of questions about how jazzy was Italy, small town beach Italy at that time. Was there a jazz club with a neon sign indoors? Maybe. I don't know, but I accepted it.
But maybe it was such that you could be a just like basic saxophone player and become like a regular performer in that town because there was so
just
little
so
of
few
jazz
saxophones available. People only have accordions and they're just so thrilled that somebody has a saxophone. I also need to just talk about my favorite scene in that movie, which is the obviously extremely platonic scene where Jude Law is naked in a bath, candlelit, playing chess with Matt Damon's Tom Ripley, who is fully clothed, sitting on the edge of the bath. And I'm like, it's that moment, I think, that the idea of Saltburn was born in Emerald Fennell's brain. And in my opinion, it should have been aborted.
I thought much,
But like, I was like, oh, I do really appreciate, though, how hard that 1999 movie leans into the queerness that's in the text. And it's also got a fair amount of gay panic, too, right? Like, it has both. It has very queer moments like that Tom Ripley is jumping on Jude Law's back and they're frolicking in Italy and he's giving him a piggyback ride. He's hugging him on a Vespa. Like, they really work in a lot of physical moments between those two that we don't see to that extent in the book or in this noir adaptation.
But so is the character of Peter Smith Kingsley in the book? Because he's in the movie, but not the series. And it that seems like a kind of notable omission from the series.
He's in the book, but minor. So the movie makes that, like, again, I've heard, I think it's Mark Harris writing for Vulture. So he wrote an article that's literally called, Is Tom Ripley Gay? It's a great article to read because it talks about different adaptations and like how the sexuality of Tom Ripley is featured or not featured and explored. And he essentially says that 1999 movie, if we think of Patricia Highsmith's book, her really rich text as a palace, like the 1999 movie is just throwing open doors that she would never walk through. So the adapting of that character into like a man that Matt Damon, after murdering, Dickie, Freddie, on the run, impersonating Dickie, that he like takes up and is clearly in love with this other character, like that never happens in the books to that extent. And by the second book, Patricia Highsmith has backed away completely from the ambiguous sexuality and he's like married and with a woman. So it's so interesting. And also it's interesting that her disavowal of Tom Ripley's sexuality later in life, so she was quite a bit older, when she was like, oh, he's not really gay. Like, she was a very severe alcoholic who had a lot of really bad takes and did not have a lot of good relationships in her life. So I kind of think it's like her original, when she wrote that book, she was younger. We know that she was an out lesbian. She was like a surprisingly out lesbian for that time. She talked a lot about her queerness and sexuality and trying to like men. So she was an out lesbian who hated actually spending a lot of time with women and preferred the company of men. So she tried to see if she could have sex with men because she enjoyed being around them more socially. Like, she's not a nice person, and it's important to understand that about her. Her favorite thing was breeding hundreds of snails in her London apartment and then carrying them around in her purse with lettuce to dinner parties. Like, she was really weird and strange and like an outcast. And I kind of love that about her. But I think it is a window into how she writes her characters, right? Like, I really do think we're supposed, like, Tom Ripley is supposed to be queer and strange. And whether we interpret that as sexually queer, that's sort of up to the person adapting it. But it's interesting that like later she kind of backed away from that. And I don't really know if it's for commercial reasons or if it's just the mood she was in when she did that interview. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's not the most reliable source for us because of like her alcoholism and just how mean she was to people. She was really mean.
Right.
I still kind of want to go back in time and weirdly be at that dinner party where she brought all the snails, though, in her purse. Like,
yeah.
Just don't you want to see someone pull a head of lettuce with 100 snails out of their purse? How big is this purse? Could 100 snails fit in your Marge purse, for example, Andrea? I would love to know. Can you fit a head of lettuce in there?
Absolutely not.
Can you?
Was
yeah.
her background though, like was she like from a wealthy family? Like
no. What's super interesting about her to me and her biographical information is actually like she wrote what was to become her first adapted book, Strangers on a Train, at a Yaddo residency. She was endorsed by Truman Capote to go do that. So they knew each other. I find that really interesting in terms of temperament, like two difficult, brilliant writers who are like difficult, loathsome people in a lot of ways. But she tried to get a job in like New York high society after that. So after she sort of like I want to become a writer, she tried to work at like Harper's Bazaar, the New Yorker, Women's Wear Daily, and was like rejected from all those jobs. And that's when she ended up sort of becoming a novelist and becoming more reclusive. So I think she felt excluded from New York high society, which I find so interesting in, the theme of this book, right? Of somebody who can kind of mimic
that's
these
what
people.
I was wondering. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It isn't her background a little bit. It's interesting, but she didn't enjoy people, but was a keen observer of them, I think. And that's, I think, how we can understand Tom as well, especially in the books. Like, he practices every social interaction. A lot of the book is him alone having imaginary conversations with Dickie, with Marge. Even after he's murdered Dickie, he's having imaginary conversations because he has to keep impersonating him and he has to write letters. So the book is very epistolary too, right? Because he's writing to the Greenleafs in New York, and he's also keeping up a ruse with Marge, and he's also writing things to himself. So it's really interesting. Like, he's really he wants to disappear into Dickie in a way where because he wants this like better life that Tom Ripley doesn't have. And the idea that he would have to go back to being Tom Ripley is very upsetting to him in the books. Because he's kind of like, I've put on a new skin. I'm this guy now. And I want to see Grease as Dickie Greenleaf. I don't want to see Grease as Tom Ripley because that guy sucks. Like, that's how he sort of thinks of himself. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Watching the series made me miss the art of handwriting letters. And when was the last time any of you used like a stamp, like a date stamp on something, or a typewriter?
I know.
Or read? I know newspapers still exist, but like that.
I get the New York Times every Sunday delivered to my house. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I haven't read a newspaper in a long time in like that broadsheet format where you like take it to a cafe and like open it with a coffee. Like, I haven't done that in forever. Like, it just made me nostalgic for a lot of like.
I don't know if I would do
like
that. That sounds almost a bit pretentious to like bring the newspaper to the coffee shop, but I'm going to Europe this summer, so perhaps I'll try it there and see how it works.
But I do think that technology piece is so interesting, right? Like, we don't have a Ripley movie that's like set in 2024 because we can't. Because the movie relies on the fact that you need to be able to go somewhere else and people don't recognize you and they can't find a picture of you online. Like, it falls apart if they see you. There's a spoiler at the end of the series where the inspector suddenly realizes, like, wait, that's Dickie? I have never met that guy in my life. Like, it's later he gets a copy of Marge's book and there's a photograph of Dickie in it. So I think that's an interesting little thing about stories about cons, right? It's like in the modern internet age, people still con, but they have to move communities a lot more quickly. And then if people overlap in communities with them, like if you're an online small time scammer, like you get caught a lot more quickly. Like, this really is sort of like, you can go to Europe and become somebody totally new. That doesn't really exist, I think, the same way in our modern moment.
I was going to say the series, the Spanish series about bank heists. I don't know if you've seen any of theirs, like Casa de Papel. There are like 3 or 4 different incarnations of the Spanish series about these great heists. And there's one set in Germany where they're trying to pull off this big heist. And no, sorry, they're in Paris. And anyway, when they want to create this character, they have their, web experts that give him this tremendous past online. And it's wild to watch, like what they have to do to create. And I thought, well, I guess that's how we get around this now, is that you have to have, if you want to try and do this ruse, you have to have a computer expert that can also go online and make fake profiles all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different thing, but I think the impulse though that maybe all of us have, I mean, maybe you both have amazing lives, so you've never had this impulse, but what if I blew up my life? Like, what if I just went somewhere and started over? I think that's like a profound thing that people still feel. And I also think that's sort of what pulls this book along, right? Like pulls this along as a text that people want to adapt. And also just like the true lack of fairness that is who is born with means and who isn't, right? Like Tom Ripley, how talented he is interesting too, right? Because like Ripley gets rid of the talented Mr. And it's interesting to me because like I do think we're not supposed to think of this Ripley as competent as the Matt Damon's Ripley, who's picking up Italian really quickly, who's a really, really, really good mimic. Like we see Andrew Scott do some impressions, but we also see him pull a really false move, which is bring that Italian gangster into Dickie's house, basically to be like, hey, be gay, do crimes. And Dickie's like, absolutely not. I do not want to be involved with the mafia. That is a horrible idea. And it kind of turns him on him, right? So I thought, oh, it's such an interesting choice. That exists in the book, by the way, but in the book, he gets Dickie to come talk to this guy outside. It's interesting that in the series adaptation, he brings that like obvious thug into the house. And right away, you can tell Dickie's like uncomfortable. So that element I always think is interesting too. This element of like maybe striking fear into the hearts of the rich, that like some canny interloper could just like worm their way into your family and like take your inheritance and take your kid away. There's something in there for everybody, I think. Whether you want to be a climber, you want a better life, or if you want to hate the poors, that's there for you too. You can be suspicious, right?
Well, but I think that's why we're rooting for Tom all the time, right?
Yeah.
We're like, no, it's unfair. It's completely unfair. When Tom gets the money after Dickie's dead and Cate Blanchett, sees him for the first time, his body language has changed. He's so much more confident. He's, he carries himself in a completely different way. Yeah. And it's amazing to see that. And then you're watching that as, one of the working class here, going, oh my gosh, that's so true. Like that is it, isn't it? That confidence, that ease, that you don't have any fears. Everything's at your fingertips.
Well, that's why I think like in spite of, all these adaptations happening in different eras with different technologies. And I think it just like, this is a story that appeals no matter like what time you're thinking of it in, because there are some universal themes like you're mentioning, like the American dream, but kind of like murdery, right? Like that you can sort of find a way to become one of the elite, right?
If you're not going to inherit wealth, I guess you have to murder the child of a wealthy person and become that child, and then you will inherit wealth. That's how you're going to inherit wealth, right? Like it is one way to get in the will, like it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. And just like Cynara, you're mentioning like this sort of appeal, whether you've ever seriously considered it or not, of like faking your death and just starting fresh, and like, what would you do? Where would you go? Like, you know what I mean? Just like that. I think in everybody's imagination, there's a speck of that. Like if I started all over again, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
So the moment of truth has come. If you were going to rewatch a Ripley in the future, which Ripley are you going to choose?
Lisa.
That's a tough one. I think I would go back and watch Purple Noon again. I definitely want to do that just to see, a French adaptation too. But, I mean, yeah, I'd probably just watch the movie again. You're right. I mean, Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Jude Law look so hot. And it's almost funny now with the jazz man and all that stuff too, I think.
It doesn't age well, does it?
It's, No, it moves along at a quicker pace, though, than watching an 8-hour series again, though.
Yeah.
In a post-La La Land society, a movie where it's just like a white guy teaches people jazz, it's just like harder to deal with it. It's harder to be like, okay, fine, I get. There's just something a little more loathsome about it, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's that. I don't remember being as mad about the jazz when I first saw it, but I was also like in 10th grade and in jazz band. So I probably was like, thank God jazz is in this sexy movie. Maybe someone will have sex with me. Like, I probably was thrilled. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Jude Law, Lisa Simpson. The choice is yours, right?
I was definitely in the Lisa Simpson.
I was really surprised at the end of it that I kind of found myself really enjoying the series and thinking, yeah, I will watch this again because it's so beautiful, and every shot is so gorgeous. But you do have to be prepared to live in a dark place for a long time.
Ooh, yes.
To get through the 8 hours, which is like, Lisa, you make a good point. The movie is just, a couple of hours. You have to be in that space. Plus, the scenes on the boat at the beginning are just like this pure 90s nostalgic joy of seeing those 3 actors on a yacht in Italy, just being beautiful people and sailing through the sea. Like there's this kind of a joy to watching that because it's so gorgeous.
And also, I just felt sad seeing Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was such a tremendous actor. And even in a small part like this one, he just was so good, right?
Yeah.
He's just perfect. So, yeah.
He makes a meal out of that Freddy part. He absolutely does. And I think the casting, it is worth mentioning that it's a gender fluid, non-binary actor who plays Freddy in the new adaptation. And I thought that was such an interesting choice. And I think he's Sting's son, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Playing Freddy in this one. Yes. Yeah. And I understood it as like Tom, who's a little bit queer, this other much more unself-consciously queer person shows up, and Tom's like, oh no, this person's going to have my number. Like, because immediately they take like a disliking to each other. So that was a really interesting way to treat that character. Whereas I think Philip Seymour Hoffman's character was really like just a fellow womanizer, right? Like a fellow good time guy.
Just a campy,
who just wants to who just wants to like drink and bone with Dickie, right? Like not each other, women.
But when they throw out those lines too, which I don't know if it's in the book, but just those casual little details about being wealthy, because when Tom says, oh, Dickie's at dinner, and right away, Freddie all of a sudden goes,
he'd never be at dinner at like 6:30 p.m. How dare you? Dickie's not having an early bird special. Get out of here. They have another really good line where they're like wrestling on the yacht. And Gwyneth Paltrow goes, why is it that when men play, it's always at killing each other? Like it has these great, like ominous little like writerly lines. It's a really, I have to say, it's a great screenplay, a great script for a film.
But so are we saying that all of the versions?
You got to watch them all, I think we're saying.
Depends on what you're looking for. Yeah, definitely.
You've got to assess your mood. Do you want to see Jude Law's butt? Do you want to see sexy bath chess? Are you okay with jazz in Italy and Jude Law being the king of it? I mean, there's things you have to weigh.
Yeah.
And then I feel like for the other series, it's like, do you want to look at every shot where it looks like a painting? Are you really interested in sort of seeing the micro expressions Andrew Scott is capable of? Like, it's a different pace, but it's still compelling, right?
Do you want to see a really long scene in which Freddy's head hits every stair as he's being dragged down it.
Oh my gosh, that
was a
like
bit much
weekend
for
at
me.
Bernie's moment was very intense.
Yeah.
Also, like, can we talk about that beautiful Italian cat? I love that cat so much. That beautiful Lucio the cat
yes.
who saw all. If only a cat could talk, he could have told everybody what he
only.
saw. But yeah,
Yeah.
Andrew Scott was just alone so much that they did have to find ways to like put other eyes in scenes, and I thought that was so interesting, the choice to add that little cat. I think he's like actually a star cat. I think he's in other things. He's like a
wow.
European legendary European cat actor. I don't know if that's true. Fact check that, please. But you know, he should be. I think.
Like the dog in Anatomy of a Fall.
Like Messi in Anatomy of a Fall, exactly. I hope they're friends. They need to talk to each other about the toll of fame.
Power couple.
So we like to leave our episodes on things we recommend. Cynara, do you want to go first?
Yes. So I would absolutely want to recommend that is Tom Ripley Gay article for Vulture. I think it's such a great like survey of all the Ripleys. So that particular writer has read all of the book adaptations and also watched the foreign adaptations. So, you know, there is an adaptation where where John Malkovich plays Ripley. So he has a cameo in the new series, which is a nod to the fact that he's played Ripley as well. Ripley's Game, maybe. So there's quite a few different adaptations of different Ripley books. So I think it's just a great sort of survey article to read and enjoy if you do watch the new Ripley series, just like as a companion piece. I would super recommend reading.
Excellent. Lisa?
Yeah, so I picked up a book in my favorite way. It's almost like a book roulette I play when I go to the free book exchanges around the Lower Mainland. And I picked up a really interesting book called This Must Be the Place. It's an Irish novel by an author named Maggie O'Farrell. And it's a really fun book, and it kind of jumps around different characters at different times in their life and different places where they're living. There's an actor, there's like lots of regret, different, I don't know. I almost don't, again, it's more fun to just come at the book without knowing anything. So it's from 2016. I think it was adapted into an Irish miniseries, but it's really a really fun book to read.
Excellent. Thanks. I'm going to recommend this TV show called The Repair Shop. It's a BBC series, and basically the premise is just that there's this group of expert craftspeople gathered in a workshop, and regular people just bring them their family heirlooms that need to be repaired, like they've been broken or they're worn out or whatever. It can be anything from like a stuffed animal to like a dresser to a toy train that they had as a child. And then these group of craftspeople fixes it and repairs it and then returns it to them. It's a very gentle show, and it's very satisfying to watch it because like people often have real emotional attachments because it's been like passed down from generation to generation, and they want it to see it restored to how it was when, like it was new. And so, or, restored, but with their memories. It's a very gentle and lovely show, and it's very British, and I love it.
How do you see it if it's on BBC?
It's on BritBox. I have BritBox.
Oh, okay, BritBox.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
No one brings the thing that can't be fixed, right? Because that is upsetting to me. I want to know that for sure that everything that gets brought in can be repaired.
I haven't seen that happen yet.
Okay, great. I need the stakes to be just so gentle. I'm either watching bloody murders
Yes, exactly.
or it's got to be like nothing bad haans to anybody. So I just had to double check. I don't want anyone to be like turned away.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Cynara. We always love having you. And
it was wonderful. And you could take a deep dive. I wasn't meaning a pun with the drowning scene and all that. But,
whoa, I'm never going out on a boat with you, Lisa. I don't know
show
what
you
you're
a
stealing
deep
from me,
dive.
though. No, I just,
Your
yeah,
identity.
again,
It's just something small.
be gay, do crimes, right? Like there's something about that with that story format that will always appeal to me as a chaotic bisexual. Actually, that's how I'll end this. Canonically, I think we can think of Tom Ripley as a bisexual because this is his line in the book. I can't make up my mind whether I like men or women, so I'm thinking of giving them both up. And that's what he says. That's his like little party joke.
There you go.
Is he gay? Maybe not. Maybe he's bi.
Wow.
Anyway.
Well, as always, if you want to reach us, you can email us at popthiscollective@gmail.com or message us on the socials.
And a big thanks to Andrea Gin, who does all the heavy lifting, writing outlines, producing this podcast, co-hosting, watching shows. Thank you so much. And also, a thank you. We're going to be having lots of guest hosting coming up. Cynara, it's really appreciated that you will be here with us.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be weird if after every guest comes on Pop This who isn't me, they disappeared? Like guests. That'd be so weird, right?
Especially now that you've said it.
Weird.
Yeah,
so
very weird.
Yeah.
So weird. I mean, I heard they went to Rome, so they're probably still there. You know, that's where people go when you can't find them.
That's the euphemism now, hey? When you can't find them now. Yeah. I think he went to Rome.
Should you check Rome?
Okay, well, thanks for joining us.
Ciao.
And bye, everybody.